It was a crisp morning in early June of the year 2015 when Sarah stood barefoot in the hotel room in Salt Lake City, Utah. The air conditioner buzzed low. The blinds were halfway open, letting in slivers of light that cut across the wrinkled bed sheets and her untouched suitcase. She had dreamed about this moment since she was a little girl. Her honeymoon, her new life, her fresh start. But the silence was heavy. Her husband, Mark, had stepped out earlier that morning. Said he was going to grab coffee downstairs. That was 5 hours ago. Sarah, born and raised just outside of Ogden, Utah, had always been the kind of woman who gave her whole heart. At 295 pounds, she knew she didn't fit the narrow standard of beauty. But she believed in something deeper, in loyalty, in kindness, in old-school values that were richer than looks. She thought Mark did too. That's what he told her when they met. That he loved her heart. That he didn't care about the weight. But that morning, everything cracked. By noon, she'd called his phone 12 times. No answer. At 1 in the afternoon, she called the front desk. No one had seen him. At 2, she walked to the lobby barefoot, her sandals forgotten in her rush. The clerk gave her a sympathetic look and handed her a sealed envelope. Her name was written on it in Mark's rushed handwriting. She opened it with trembling hands. The note was short, cold, final. "I'm sorry. I thought I could do this. I can't. Please don't look for me." Her knees buckled. Right there, in the lobby, beside a potted plant and a vending machine humming in the background, she collapsed. A stranger tried to help her up. She waved him off. The weight of the words, and of her own body, felt unbearable. Later that night, she sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at herself in the mirror. Mascara streaks ran down her cheeks. Her wedding dress still hung in the corner, untouched since the ceremony just 2 days earlier. "I gave him everything," she whispered. "Everything I had." She had saved for that wedding for 3 years, worked 2 jobs, cut back on every little thing. No fancy dinners, no new clothes. She poured her heart and money into that marriage, believing it would bring her the prosperity she always dreamed of. Not just financial, but emotional wealth, health, a life built on strong values. And now all of it felt like a cruel joke. Her phone buzzed again, a message from her sister asking how the trip was going. She didn't answer. How could she? How do you explain to someone that your husband abandoned you on your honeymoon in a strange city with no explanation? That night, she didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling and thought of everything she had sacrificed, everything she had swallowed, all the times people made comments about her size, at work, in grocery stores, even at church, and she smiled through it. The world had always made her feel less than. Now, even the man who swore to love her forever walked away. And in that moment, something broke inside Sarah. Not just the heartbreak, but something deeper. A silence that turned into fire. Not anger, not yet. Just heat, raw, trembling, new, and though she didn't know it yet, that fire would become everything. That night marked the death of the old Sarah, and the first breath of the new one. The sun rose over Salt Lake City the next morning. But for Sarah, it felt like the longest night of her life had never really ended. She sat in the hotel room, wrapped in a white towel, staring at the wedding dress she never wore again. Her hair was still damp from the shower she took, hoping it might wash away the pain, the shame, the disbelief. But it didn't. Nothing could. Room service knocked once. She didn't answer. Hunger sat heavy in her belly, but pride kept her quiet. Pride and the fear of being seen. Of someone looking at her and thinking, "That's the woman who got left behind." At 3 in the afternoon, Sarah checked out of the hotel. She didn't cry at the desk. She didn't explain. She just handed over the key, nodded, and walked out into the Utah heat with a single suitcase, and her heart torn in half. For the next 2 days, she stayed with her cousin Lisa in Ogden. Lisa didn't ask questions. She just let Sarah sleep on the couch, gave her coffee in the morning, and wrapped her in blankets at night. But even in the quiet of Lisa's home, Sarah couldn't escape the echo of Mark's words. "I thought I could do this. I can't." That sentence became poison. It replayed in her mind while she brushed her teeth, while she sat in silence at the kitchen table, while she stared out the window at the dry mountains, wondering how love could disappear so fast. On the third night, Lisa finally broke the silence. "You gotta stop blaming yourself," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You didn't do anything wrong, Sarah." Sarah looked up slowly. "Then why wasn't I enough?" Lisa shook her head. "That man didn't leave because of your size. He left because he's weak. Cowards run when things get real." Sarah didn't respond. But something shifted. That night, after Lisa went to bed, Sarah sat in the dark living room with her phone in her lap. She opened the calculator app. Her finger hovered, then typed. 295 minus 165. 130. That was the weight she used to dream of reaching. A number that had once felt impossible, unrealistic. But now it felt like the only thing she could control. Sarah had spent her whole life waiting for others to see her worth, to love her for her heart, her values, her loyalty. But where had that gotten her? Alone, abandoned, forgotten. That night, with nothing left to lose, she made a decision that would shape the rest of her life. She wrote it down on a napkin from the kitchen counter. "This ends with me. No more waiting. I choose me now." The next morning, she walked into the nearest gym. Her heart pounded. The receptionist barely looked up at first. Then he noticed her, saw the hesitation in her face, and smiled kindly. "First time?" he asked. She nodded. "Yeah, first time in a long time." He handed her a clipboard. "We've got everything here. We do health coaching, nutrition, group, support. You're not alone." Those words hit her harder than she expected. She wasn't here for revenge, not yet. She was here because she needed to build something new, something solid, a life with real prosperity, not just in dollars or appearance, but in strength, confidence, health, wealth of spirit. She signed up for the beginner plan. Day 1 was brutal. Her legs shook after 10 minutes on the treadmill. Her lungs burned. She sweated through her shirt, and when she walked past the mirror, she had to look away. But she came back the next day, and the next, and the next. Lisa packed her healthy meals. Sarah read about nutrition late at night. She cut out sugar, started drinking water, started journaling her emotions instead of stuffing them down. Each pound she lost didn't just show on the scale. It showed in her eyes. A light came back, a focus, a fire. By the end of the first month, she'd lost 12 pounds. By the end of the second, she'd lost 20 more. Still, she didn't post about it online. She didn't call Mark. She didn't chase closure. She was building something deeper now, a life with health and peace at the center. A life grounded in values, not in someone else's approval. And what she didn't know, what she couldn't see yet, was that her story was already becoming one of quiet power. That the world hadn't seen the last of Sarah from Utah. Not even close. By the third month, something inside Sarah had shifted for good. She no longer walked into the gym with her eyes down. Now, she held the door open for others. She greeted the receptionist by name. She knew the trainers' schedules and smiled when her name showed up on the whiteboard for class sign-ups. Her weight had dropped from 295 pounds to 230. But it wasn't just about the pounds. It was the way she stood taller, the way she made eye contact, the way she turned down junk food with a quiet confidence that said, "I know what I'm building." One afternoon, after a tough boot camp class, her coach, Derek, pulled her aside. He wiped his forehead with a towel and nodded at her progress chart. "You've been putting in the work," he said. "Proud of you, Sarah." She smiled, still catching her breath. "Thanks. I'm not done." He laughed. "Clearly not. You're on fire." What he didn't know, what nobody saw, was how many nights Sarah cried herself to sleep between workouts. How many times she stood in front of the fridge at midnight and whispered, "You don't need this," with her hands shaking. How many weekends she sat alone instead of going to parties because she didn't trust herself around pizza or wine. But she stayed the course. Every single day. By month 5, she started a blog. Quiet at first, just a simple site called She Builds Again. She wrote about pain, about rejection, about the weight of being overlooked. She didn't name Mark. She didn't need to. She wrote about money too, how she had spent years giving it all away to people who didn't value her, and now she was saving it, using it to invest in her health, in her prosperity, buying vitamins, new shoes, a blender for green smoothies. "Money isn't just paper," she wrote. "It's choice, it's freedom, and I'm done spending it on people who never saw my worth." Her blog picked up readers, mostly women. Some overweight, some not. Some divorced, some still healing. But all of them said the same thing. "Your words feel like mine." Sarah kept going. By month 6, her weight hit 195 pounds. By month 7, she joined a hiking group. The first trail nearly broke her. Her legs screamed. Her back throbbed. She wanted to quit after 20 minutes, but something kept pushing her forward. A quiet voice in her gut whispering, "You've survived worse." When she reached the summit, wind hitting her face, looking down at the valley where she was born and raised, she felt something crack open in her chest. A release. "I'm still here," she whispered. She got a part-time job at a local health food store. Not because she needed the money. Lisa was still helping with rent, but because she wanted to be surrounded by reminders of her new life. Organic fruits, protein powders, shelves filled with books about wellness, prosperity, purpose, and healing. She met people who spoke her language now, folks who cared about values, who treated their bodies like homes instead of cages. And slowly, the world she had once felt so small inside started to feel wide open. One night, while sipping tea on Lisa's porch, Sarah looked up at the sky and said, "Do you think he ever thinks about me?" Lisa didn't blink. "I hope he does. I hope he sees what he lost, and I hope it burns." Sarah chuckled. "I don't even think I'm mad anymore. I want peace." Lisa leaned back. "You're not just finding peace, Sarah. You're creating wealth, real wealth, health, freedom, strength. That's the kind of richness no man can take away." Sarah nodded. The fire in her chest burned steady now. Not wild like before, but focused, controlled, clear. She was no longer trying to prove anything to Mark, or to the strangers who laughed at her in restaurants, or to the girls in high school who had whispered behind her back. She was building something real. And one day, though she didn't know when or how, she knew she'd be face to face with the past again. And this time, she would be the one standing tall. By the time the calendar flipped to January of the next year, Sarah had dropped to 175 pounds. It had been exactly 7 months since the day she was left alone in that Salt Lake City hotel room, holding a note that shattered her world. But now, Every part of her life looked different. Her body, her routine, her thoughts, even the way she breathed. On the outside, people saw the physical change first. The slimmer waist, the sharper jawline, the smaller clothes. But the real transformation ran deeper. She had rebuilt her identity from the inside out, and it showed in the way she moved, spoke, and showed up for herself. She didn't whisper anymore. At the local gym, she had gone from the shy woman in oversized leggings to the one leading group warm-ups. People asked her for advice now. Women pulled her aside and said, "You inspire me." One older man even asked if she'd considered personal training. She laughed, but the idea stayed with her. Sarah had started using her blog to talk more openly, not just about weight loss, but about the emotional weight that came with being abandoned. She wrote about money differently now, too. How she stopped wasting it on emotional band-aids like takeout and impulse buys, and started investing it in health, therapy, and books that helped her understand her values. Her most shared post was titled, "Losing weight didn't fix me. It showed me who I already was." It hit a nerve. People from all over started emailing her, sharing their own stories, thanking her for being real, for being raw, for telling the truth when everyone else was chasing likes. That's when the offers started coming in. A wellness brand from California offered her a paid partnership. They liked how she talked about prosperity, not as something flashy or shallow, but as a grounded way of living. They sent her a box of products and a contract. She stared at the numbers. It was more money than she'd made in 3 months working retail. Lisa found her sitting on the porch that night, holding the contract with tears in her eyes. "You okay?" Lisa asked. Sarah paused. "I never thought something like this would come from so much pain." Lisa nodded. "That's the thing about pain. If you use it right, it turns into power." Sarah signed the deal the next morning. A week later, she opened a separate bank account, her Freedom Fund, she called it. She made a budget, tracked every dollar, started reading about investments, passive income, and financial wealth beyond just surviving. The girl who once cried in hotel bathrooms now had a savings account and a brand sponsor. She wasn't rich, not yet, but she was rooted, and that felt like more than enough. One cold morning in February, Sarah returned to the same hotel where it all began, not to revisit the pain, but to walk through it. She booked the room, same floor, same view. She stood at the window and let herself feel the echoes, the stillness, the memory of sitting on that carpeted floor, crushed and alone. But this time, she wasn't the same woman. She took a deep breath and whispered, "Thank you." Not to Mark, but to the moment, to the fire, to the heartbreak that had broken her open. Before leaving, she left her own note on the nightstand. It said, "I am not the girl you left behind, and I never needed you to become who I am." As she walked out, she didn't look back. Sarah was no longer chasing closure. She was building a life grounded in health, prosperity, and values that couldn't be shaken. And as her footsteps echoed down the hallway, one truth became clear. She wasn't done rising yet. Not even close. It was the first Saturday of May when Sarah stepped into that downtown Salt Lake City cafe. She had planned to just grab a coffee, answer a few emails, and head to the community event where she was scheduled to speak about personal growth and emotional wealth. She wore a fitted blazer, jeans that finally hugged her curves the right way, and a soft cream blouse that complemented her glow. She didn't hide her body anymore, not under oversized sweatshirts, not under shame. At 160 pounds, Sarah looked and felt like a woman reborn, not because of the number on the scale, but because she knew what she had built to get there. Every inch lost was a step reclaimed. Every habit rebuilt had been a quiet revolution. The barista smiled when she ordered her usual. "Large oat milk latte, right?" Sarah grinned. "You know me too well." She turned to find a seat and froze. 3 tables away, facing the window, sat Mark. Same dark hair, same slouch in his shoulders, same tired, distracted expression. But he looked smaller now. Not in size, but in spirit. Like life had taken its toll. He was staring into his cup, lost in thought, until the sound of her name from the barista jolted him. "Sarah, your latte's ready." He looked up. Their eyes met. And for a moment, time just stopped. His face drained of color. The cup in his hand slipped slightly, then crashed onto the floor. Coffee spread across the table and onto his jeans. He didn't move. He just stared. Sarah walked over slowly. Calm. Grounded. She didn't feel fear. She didn't feel rage. What she felt, surprisingly, was clarity. "Hey, Mark," she said softly. He blinked. "Sarah?" She nodded. "Yeah, it's me." He stood abruptly, still shaken, trying to find the words. You look healthy?" she offered. "No, I mean, yes, but wow, I didn't even recognize you." "I get that a lot lately." The silence between them was heavy, but not for her. She was steady. He was the one unraveling. "I didn't expect to see you here," he finally muttered. "I live here," she said simply. "I was always from here. Remember?" He looked down, guilt crashing over him like a wave. "Sarah, I'm sorry." She gave a small nod. "I know." "I was scared," he continued. "Back then, I didn't know how to handle things. I wasn't ready. I didn't mean to hurt you like that." "But you did," she replied. "Not cruel, just honest. You left me on day 1 of our marriage. You walked out without saying goodbye. You didn't even give me a chance." "I hated myself for it," he said, his voice cracking. "Still do." She paused, then sat down across from him. "You know, Mark, for a long time I thought I needed your apology, your words, your explanation. But I've realized something." He looked up, eyes glassy. "What?" "I didn't need you to say sorry. I needed to say yes, to myself." Mark lowered his gaze again, but she wasn't done. "I built a new life," she continued. "I found prosperity in ways I never thought possible. Health, strength, real wealth. Not just money, but peace, purpose, values that actually matter. And guess what?" He waited. "I'm happy, genuinely. I don't need closure anymore. I've got a future." Mark's voice was barely above a whisper. "You look incredible. Not just the weight, but everything. You look alive." Sarah smiled. "Because I am." She stood up, grabbed her latte, and looked him in the eye one last time. "I wish you well, Mark, I really do. But that chapter's closed." He nodded, speechless. As she walked out of the cafe, heads turned. Not because of her body or her outfit, but because of her presence, her energy, her radiance. The girl who had once been left behind was now the woman people couldn't look away from. And somewhere behind her, Mark sat at that table, still holding an apology that came 7 months too late. The following Monday, Sarah walked into the community center on Main Street, just a few blocks from where she grew up in Ogden, Utah. The walls were lined with framed photos of past speakers, flyers about local support groups, and quotes that talked about healing, resilience, and the importance of values. The place smelled like fresh paint and peppermint tea. It wasn't fancy, but it was familiar. Grounded. Real. Sarah wasn't nervous, not like she used to be. She had been invited to speak at the Women of Worth event, a gathering for women navigating recovery, divorce, grief, and transformation. It wasn't just about survival. It was about rebirth. Her name was listed in bold on the program. Sarah Caldwell, From Rock Bottom to Rebirth, a story of real wealth. When the host introduced her, Sarah walked up slowly, steady in her heels, wearing a simple black dress and gold necklace that had once belonged to her grandmother. She didn't use notes. She didn't need them. She took a deep breath and began. My name is Sarah, and about 11 months ago I was left by my husband on our honeymoon. No fight, no warning, just a note on the nightstand and silence. Gasps spread through the room. Heads turned, eyes locked in. I weighed 295 pounds at the time. I had spent years pouring all my money, energy, and love into someone who never saw my value. And in that moment, sitting alone in a hotel room, still wearing my wedding ring, I believed I was unlovable. She paused, scanning the crowd. The silence was electric. But here's what I know now. Love isn't something you wait for. It's something you give yourself first. And what I gave myself, finally, was a chance to start over. She told them about her first gym visit, about crying in parking lots, about losing over 160 pounds without shortcuts or magic pills, about how she rewrote her relationship with money, stopped using it to soothe pain, and started investing in real health, body, mind, and spirit. I stopped begging people to choose me, she said, voice steady, and I chose myself. The room was still. Not even a cough. I don't stand here as someone who has it all figured out. I still battle doubt. I still have days where the old shame knocks on my door. But I've built a life grounded in prosperity. Not just in income, but in integrity. Not just in size, but in strength. And that is a kind of wealth no one can walk away from. When she stepped down, women hugged her. Some cried into her shoulder. Others whispered thank you like a confession. A teenage girl with tears in her eyes said, "You sound like my future. I needed to hear this." That night, Sarah went home and sat on her bed, staring out the window at the soft glow of the Utah mountains. She had just opened an email from a national wellness company. They wanted to feature her on their podcast. There was also a speaking fee attached. A number that, just a year ago, would have seemed like a fantasy. Money for her voice, for her truth, for her pain turned purpose. Lisa walked in holding 2 mugs of tea. "You know what I was thinking?" she said. "He might have broken you, yeah, but only enough to crack you open. And look what poured out." Sarah smiled. "I'm not mad at him anymore," she said. "I'm just grateful I didn't stay small to keep someone else comfortable." The next morning, she posted a new blog entry. It read, "You don't have to prove your worth. You have to live it. Loud, bold, and without apology. Because when you show the world who you are, the right people will hear you." And people did. That post would go on to be read by over 100,000 women. Not because it was polished, but because it was true. Sarah Caldwell was no longer just surviving. She was speaking, leading, building a life richer than she ever imagined, not from revenge, but from values, vision, and victory. It was Friday, June 5th, exactly 1 year to the day since Mark left her in that hotel room. Sarah sat backstage at a mid-sized auditorium just outside Provo, Utah, wearing a wireless mic and sipping lukewarm lemon water. The lights buzzed overhead. Her name was on the giant screen behind the podium in bold white font. Sarah Caldwell, Healing Through Fire, How to Reclaim Your Story. It wasn't just a talk this time. It was the keynote. The event had sold out weeks in advance. Over 400 women, health coaches, therapists, and survivors of all walks of life had shown up to hear her speak. She could see some of them from behind the curtain, laughing, hugging, wiping their eyes after earlier talks. A volunteer peeked in. 5 minutes, Miss Caldwell." Sarah nodded. "Thank you." She stood and walked to the mirror. 155 pounds. A strong back, clear eyes, glowing skin. She wore a tailored blue dress and heels that didn't hurt her feet anymore. Not because the shoes changed, but because she had. She used to want revenge. Now she only wanted impact, and she was making it. In the past 3 months, she'd been featured on podcasts, guest blogged for national magazines, and even closed her first paid coaching program. Her money mindset had transformed, not just income, but the way she talked about prosperity, worth, and wealth in every sense: financial, emotional, spiritual. But what mattered most to Sarah wasn't the spotlight. It was the quiet moments. The woman who emailed her last week saying, "Because of you, I went back to school." The mother who said her teenage daughter started eating again. The nurse from Michigan who'd printed every single one of Sarah's blog posts and put them in a binder. That's what mattered. The lights dimmed. The music faded. And then she heard the host say her name. She stepped out to a standing ovation. She hadn't even spoken yet. Sarah smiled, walked to center stage, and took a deep breath. "I want to start with a number," she said. 295. That was my weight on the day my life fell apart. A number I used to hate. A number I used to think defined my worth. She paused. But I've learned something since then. That number didn't define me. It refined me. Every pound I carried back then was a part of my story. A chapter, a scar, a reminder. And today I carry something different. Not weight, but wisdom. The audience leaned in. "I talk about health now, but not just physical. I mean emotional, mental, financial. I talk about money not because I love numbers, but because I believe financial freedom is a tool for safety, for dignity, for building a future rooted in your values." Nods filled the crowd. "People ask me all the time, was it worth it? Losing the weight, losing the marriage, losing everything I thought made me whole." She smiled gently. "It was never about losing. It was about returning. To myself." Sarah finished her speech to roaring applause and a line of women who waited over an hour just to hug her. As the last person stepped away, she looked up to see Lisa at the back of the room, holding a bouquet of white daisies, the same kind they used to pick as kids. Lisa walked up and hugged her tight. "You didn't just change your life," she whispered. "You changed theirs." Sarah blinked back tears. "I just told the truth." Later that night, back at home, she curled up on the couch with her laptop and clicked publish on her latest post. June 5th. 1 year ago, I was left behind. Today, I was lifted up. If you're reading this and feel like you're drowning, I promise, there's land. There's wealth in your story. There's prosperity in your pain. Keep going. You are not done. Her inbox flooded within minutes. But this time, she didn't cry. She just smiled, because she knew the girl who once doubted if she was worth loving was now lighting fires in other women. And the best part? The world still hadn't seen everything she was becoming. On the morning of June 12th, just 1 week after the anniversary of her abandonment, Sarah stepped into the television studio in downtown Salt Lake City. The local morning show had invited her to share her story, not because she had lost 165 pounds, but because she had turned pain into power, shame into strength, and silence into a movement that was changing lives. The producer smiled as she guided Sarah to the green room. "You've got 5 minutes. They'll ask about the transformation, your blog, and that moment in the coffee shop. You okay with all that?" Sarah nodded. "I've lived through worse than a few questions." She wore a soft burgundy dress and carried herself like a woman who knew who she was. No frills, no act, just grounded values and unapologetic truth. As the cameras rolled and the host introduced her, viewers across Utah, and eventually all over the country, would hear a voice that didn't sound bitter or broken, but clear, calm, and whole. "I used to think the worst thing that ever happened to me was being left on my honeymoon," Sarah said, looking straight into the lens. "But now I know it was the moment that forced me to stop waiting and start rising." The host leaned in. "You lost over 160 pounds, built a brand, and are coaching women across the country. What kept you going?" Sarah smiled. "The truth? I got tired of living like I wasn't worth loving. I had to change what I believed about health, about money, about prosperity. I stopped chasing people and started chasing purpose, and the rest followed." The host paused. "And Mark, have you spoken since that day in the coffee shop?" Sarah nodded slowly. "No, I said what I needed to say. That moment wasn't about him. It was about me taking my voice back." The host smiled. "You've come so far." Sarah's eyes softened. "And I'm still going." After the segment aired, her inbox exploded. National outlets reached out, book agents, conference planners, women from every state, all echoing the same message. "You told my story." That night, Sarah and Lisa sat on the porch under the stars, drinking chamomile tea. "You know," Lisa said, "when you came back from that honeymoon, I wasn't sure how you were going to get through it." Sarah looked out at the Utah skyline. "Neither did I." "But you didn't just survive," Lisa added. "You built wealth, real wealth, not just in money but in self-worth, in peace, in knowing you don't have to shrink to be seen." Sarah nodded, quiet. Then she stood, walked inside, and grabbed a small velvet box from her drawer. Inside it was her wedding ring, the one Mark had slipped on her finger a year ago before walking away. She took it to the backyard, dug a small hole near the base of the peach tree, and buried it. Not out of anger, not for revenge, but as a symbol, a grave for who she used to be. She stood tall in the moonlight, hands dusty, heart light. Sarah Caldwell, the girl from Utah who had once been humiliated, abandoned, and overlooked, was now a woman rooted in values, standing in her health, walking in her prosperity, and living a life full of wealth that could never be taken away. And as she turned to go back inside, one final thought rose to the surface. She didn't just rewrite the story, she became the story. And you, have you ever been underestimated, left behind, found your way back stronger? Share your story below. I'd love to hear it.